Hey, you empowered human. It is Nina here. You are officially listening to Triggered. Can we play with that wherever you get your podcasts? You might also be watching us on YouTube. So, hello, friends. And if you are not following me on Instagram, now is a great time to do that, especially if you're big on visual representation and media. So, what is today's very juicy episode going to be about? This particular episode is, of course, going to deal with triggers around a very particular topic. And of course, it is going to invite you to transform hard conversations into teachable moments. That is everything that we do on this podcast. So today, when we talk about what are we triggered by, this episode is designed for all of you who want to lean into your edge and redefine your relationship with queer identity, with queerness, with the queer community, with your own queer parts, with queer people beyond you. Do you see where I'm going with this, folks? Don't make me keep going here. You get where I'm leaning into in this episode. We are building a bridge. So if you have struggled with internalized queerphobia or externalized queerphobia, guess what? This episode is for you. I want to invite you on in, and I want to be able to play with these really uncomfortable spaces. And here's the thing. That discomfort is not because of queer people. It is because of something that exists within you. And this episode is about exploring that. Okay. So I want us to explore that. I want us to lean in. Of course, it's not going to be every facet that we could ever explore in this, but it is going to be at least one. So I want you to have a journal or a really good friend to dialogue with about what comes up for you in this episode, because of course, you know, I am curious. My friend, are you ready to play?
Welcome to Triggered. Can we play with that? You know that moment when your emotions ramp up in an instant, leaving you feeling helpless, frozen, or out of control? In that moment, you've been emotionally hijacked, the very definition of triggered. And I want to ask you, can we play with that? I'm Nina L. Garcia, drama therapist and empowerment coach of Houston Creative Arts Therapy. Join me as we discover ways to empower you and the people who mean the most to you to transform hard conversations into teachable moments. Triggered. Real playful, real respectful, real empowered.
Let's take a breath. Let's take a breath. Welcome. So one of the things that is really big in this podcast, if you haven't noticed already, is I will say to you, can we play with that? Right? Are you ready to play with this? And when we talk about playing with something, it's not like playing
let's make fun of it.
It's not like
funny things. Let's make fun of it.
Sometimes
funny things.
we do find fun things and funny things. But when I invite you to play with something, what I'm actually inviting is for you to take it and maneuver it, and be willing to look at it in different ways. That is what I mean by can we play with that? Can we be willing to see it and engage with it in a different way? So for all of you who have your journals, or you're like, I'm ready to click save, or you've got your friend there near, like, I'm ready to because y'all know I'm big on growth. That's the first thing that I want you to really invite yourself to think about. What does it mean to play with this idea of queerness, of queer identity? How do we lean in and play with that this month of June, which is of course Pride Month for those of you who don't know. So I want to invite you to play with it. That's the first thing. How can you play with it? That's the first thing. How can you? I'm going to tell you a story. And then I'm going to tell you we are inviting the empowered human community and beyond to lean into this month so that we can truly play with this topic. So first things first, can we do a story? Let's do the story. So true moment here. Let's do the story. I was standing on my street one day, and for the context of this, I'm a human being. Hello. And I'm a human. The way that I human, I won't go over every identity, but for the context of this story, the way that I human involves me identifying as a mixed individual, because I am of Puerto Rican descent. I have African, Spanish, and Indigenous. I have African, culture within my bloodstream, within my background, within my history of my family, right? And so I am a mixed individual walking out of my house onto my street to meet my neighbor who has waved me over from across the way. Furthermore, let's tell you about my neighbor. My neighbor, and just so we're clear, I'm going to cast some identities on the other people in the story in which the narratives are presenting this way, even if they don't identify necessarily this way, specifically for context for you, but also because I did not specifically ask them. So my neighbor, in this case, we're going to call that neighbor Joe. And Joe, just so we're clear, right? The moment that I'm about to share can't really encapsulate everything that Joe is. It can just be this moment. So we've got a character here, representation. Joe comes over to me from his side of the street. And Joe, for the sake of the story, is a black man in his 60s or so. And comes over to me. After he's waved me over, and I go, yes, yes, and I meet him in the middle of the street. He's waved me over, and I go, yes, yes, and I meet him in the middle of the street. Gestures down to the end of the street at this ginormous house that is being built on the street. Ginormous house. Can you believe that? On the street. And at first I'm thinking like, is he referring to like, and at first I'm thinking being so big, like it's massively larger than the other houses on our street, right? It's massively larger. Is this like a socioeconomic thing? Like, is this like a socioeconomic jealous? Like, how should I feel in this moment, right? I'm trying to like connect with this human being, right? I'm trying to like, okay, what's going on? He's frustrated about something. Okay, what's going on? Can I believe what, Joe? Right? Say it. Can I believe what? I need some clarification. Say it back. Can I believe what? And Joe looks at me and goes, can you believe this? And Joe looks at me and goes, basically men living down the street. I mean, basically, what is living down the street? Like shmen? What is that? Like schwimmen? Like shmen? It's like the light bulb went off. Snap, crackle, pop. Joe here is referring to the human beings who built that ginormous house. The two people who happen to be lesbians. Again, I'm casting this on them, although they are two women together, just so we're clear. He is using a lot of derogatory language. To refer to them. And I just stood there again and I was like, are you referring to the lesbians down the street? The lesbians who built the house there? Yes, I just whatever you want to call it. They just can't. Yes, I just whatever you want to call it. I'm going to pause the story here, y'all. Because in this moment, we have a variety of identities and characters that are already present. You got a mixed person who also identifies as queer, just so we're context of the story. Walking across the street to the black man walking across the street, seemingly identifying as heterosexual and as very definitely homophobic in this moment. About the lesbians who live down the street, and for the sake, since I've brought in race and ethnicity, white lesbian women living down the street. Now we've got a whole cast of characters that are present here. Now we've got a whole cast of characters that are present. This is what we are playing with today. If you are not in a space to play with that, it is okay to say, you know what, Nina, thank you for this offering on the table, and I'm going to exit stage left. However, if you have capacity, my friend, please walk with me, because this is a goodie, okay? This episode is a goodie, okay? Lean in with me if you can. Let's keep walking. Lean in with me if you can. Let's keep walking. I'm going to pause that story there where I had it. There really is no need to keep telling you how that conversation went or what ended up happening, because in this episode, what I want you to do is lean in first and think about where in this story do you feel that you would be? Where in this story do you feel we've had different instances of race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status potentially, and age. In this moment, with all of these different characters and roles and identities that are present, I want us to think about what does oppression look like? And where does the fear come from? And because for my neighbor Joe, who's clearly sitting with fear here, although he's expressing anger outwardly, we see the triggered part, write that down if that's you. Expressing anger on the outside, fear on the inside. Expressing fear underneath it all. Fear of what is the question. Fear of what? But I also, in this moment, don't necessarily, but I also want us to explore what that fear is. Now, just so we're clear, write that down if you're like, yes, that's the thing I want to explore. What is my fear? Yes, that's the thing I want to explore. Because if that's where you're leaning in, then fantastic. Because if that's where you are going to be a level one. And I'm going to tell you why in a second. You are going to be a level one, and I'm going to tell you why in a second. Keep a note on that. Just keep a note on that. Of this cast of characters, oppression is oppression is oppression. Of this cast of characters, oppression is oppression. And if you are not familiar with what that
not
is,
familiar with
we're going to talk
what
about
that is,
the tools of the oppressor
talk
and the
about
oppressor
the
character.
tools
And we're
of
going
the
to play with
oppressor
it,
and the
okay? Because
oppressor
I want you to
character.
be able
And we're
to
gonna
take
play
this
with it,
moment, this
okay?
20
Because
minutes
I
that
want
we're
you to
here
be able
together,
to take
and I
this
want you to
moment,
use it
this
no matter
20
what.
minutes that we're here
Because
together,
I already
and I want
know,
you to use it no
before I
matter
talk
what.
about tools of the
Because
oppressor
I
and
already
oppressor,
know,
oppression,
before I
oppression,
talk
right?
about tools of the
I
oppressor and
already
oppressor,
know
oppression, oppression,
that
right?
some people
already
are going to
know
say, now, wait a
that
minute,
some people,
you know,
are going to
you
say, now,
brought
wait a
in,
minute,
you
wait a
know,
minute,
race,
you know,
and you brought in
brought
ethnicity, and you
in,
brought in
you know,
socioeconomic status,
race,
and it
and you
can't
brought
all
in
be about
ethnicity,
queer
and you
people,
brought in
Nina.
socioeconomic
Actually,
status, and it
that's
can't all be
exactly
about
what
queer
this
people,
episode is
Nina.
about.
Actually, that's exactly what this
And
episode is
second,
about.
it's not
And second,
just
it's not
race in this
just
case, minimizing and
race in this
oppressing queer
case,
identity. Right? There is
minimizing
an
and
intersection there, and I
oppressing
want
queer
you to explore
identity.
what your own
Right? There is an
intersection might
intersection
be.
there, and I want you to explore
But
what
I
your
have
own
also
intersection might
heard
be.
homophobia from people in the queer community against other queer
from
people,
people in the
right?
queer community against
People
other
who,
queer
in the
people,
case of one
right?
moment that I it
People
just
who, in
echoes
the
in my
case of
head,
one moment
I
that
had
it
a
just echoes in my
lesbian
head.
share with
I
me.
had
She
a
didn't believe that
lesbian share with me.
bisexual
She
people
didn't
existed,
believe
right?
that
That she didn't believe
bisexual people
that
existed,
people
right?
could be attracted
That
to
she didn't
multiple people. You were
believe
either attracted
that
to men or
people
you were
could be
attracted to
attracted to
women, and
multiple
that's
people. You
the
were
way
either
that it
attracted to
was.
men or you were attracted to women, and
And
that's the
that
way that it was.
also was a
And
way of,
that
yes,
also
protecting the self and
was
fear
a
of what
way of,
happens if I
yes,
don't exist, what
protecting the
happens if
self
I
and
minimize,
fear
right?
of what
Certainly other
happens if I
people
don't
can
exist, what
exist
happens if I minimize,
beyond
right?
what
Certainly other
I
people
know to be
can
true.
exist beyond what I
And
know
yet
to be
it
true.
minimized a whole portion of humanity.
And yet it
that
minimized
does
a whole
exist
portion
that
of
way.
humanity that
And
does
so,
exist that way.
this is why we are
And so,
leaning into this, because
This
when
is
I
why we are
say
leaning into this,
oppression,
because
and when I say oppressor,
oppression, and when
I want you
say
to think of it. Here's your
oppressor,
tool. Get ready to
I
write it
want
down
you to
as a
think of it.
character.
Here's your tool. Get ready to write it down
That
as a
oppressor character has different tools that they use in order to oppress.
tools that they use in
So
order
when we
to
talk about the
oppress.
tools of the oppressor,
So when we talk about the tools
they can be
of the
used
oppressor,
by any human
they
being
can be used
that
by
can enroll
any human being
as an oppressor.
that can enroll
Any
as an
human being.
oppressor.
It does not care
Any human
about
being.
your race
It
or
does
your
not
ethnicity
care
or your
about your
nationality
race
or your
or your
socioeconomic
ethnicity
status.
or your nationality or
The
your
oppressor
socioeconomic
role
status can be a part
the
of
oppressor
any
role
human
can be
identity.
a part
The
of
only
any
requirement,
human
in fact, for
identity.
those of
The
you
only
who are like, tell
requirement,
me
in
more,
fact,
Nina.
for those of you
The
who are
only
like, tell me
requirement, in
more,
fact,
Nina,
is that you
the only
minimize,
requirement, in fact,
misrepresent,
is that you
or
minimize,
outright
reject another
misrepresent,
human
or
being for
outright
some facet of
reject
their
another
identity.
human being for some facet
That
of their identity.
is the role of the
That
oppressor.
is the role
And
of the
that
oppressor.
is what the oppressor
that
does with its
is
tools.
what the oppressor does
Minimizes,
with its
write this
tools.
down. Misrepresents, write this down. Or outright
Misrepresents, write this
rejects.
down, or
Write that
outright
down.
rejects.
Right. This is how we begin to see
This is how
that oppression can
we begin to
happen
see
regardless of
that oppression
identity,
can happen
that it is about the
regardless of
way that we
identity,
think, feel, and
that it is about
behave
the way
towards
that we
another
think,
human
feel, and
being,
behave
but it begins
towards another
internally.
human being, but it begins
So
internally.
already, we're going to pause here. I
So
want you to think and collect
Already,
your
we're going to
thoughts.
pause here. I want you to think
How are
and
you
collect
feeling
your
about this
thoughts.
idea
How are
of
you
queer
feeling
identity?
about this idea?
How are you feeling
of
about the
queer
stories that
identity?
I've told so
How
far?
are you feeling about
What's
the stories
sitting
that I've
with
told
you
so
when you
far?
think about the character
What's
of the
sitting
oppressor?
with you when you think about the
And
character of the oppressor?
what is sitting you when you think about the
And
tools
what
of
is
the
sitting you
oppressor?
when you think about the tools
The
of the
three that
oppressor?
I have listed as far as right
The three that
behaviors
I
go,
have
right,
listed
is
as far as
minimizing,
right
misrepresenting,
behaviors
or
go, right, is
outright
minimizing,
rejecting. And honestly,
misrepresenting, or
that can happen in your
outright
thoughts,
rejecting.
feelings,
And
or
honestly,
behaviors.
that
More
can
on
happen
that
in your
another
thoughts,
time.
feelings, or behaviors. More on that another time.
The next bit that I want us to be able to lean into on this, now that you've taken a minute to hopefully go over that, is the difference between a powered view of this and an empowered view. Okay,
of this.
a lot of you hear me talk about the empowered human movement and how we're trying to build bridges of understanding. That is what this episode is designed to do, to try to build a bridge of understanding.
To try to build a bridge of
In
understanding.
a powered world, we are willing to minimize, misrepresent, and outright reject.
To minimize,
In a powered
misrepresent, and
world,
outright reject.
I am
In a
willing
powered
to
world,
remove your
I am
agency and
willing
to oppress
to remove
you
your agency
if it
and to
means
oppress
that I
you
will still be
if
okay
it
at the end of the
means
day.
that I will still be okay
Most
at the
of
end
us
of the day.
are raised
Most
to
of us
engage in
are
powered
raised
ways.
to engage in
What this
powered
also means in the
ways.
context of these stories is
What this
exactly
also
what
means
my
in the
neighbor
context of
Joe,
these
the
stories
way
is
that he was
exactly what my
acting was
neighbor
a
Joe,
powered
the
way.
way that he was acting was a powered
Because
way.
Joe felt some kind of way about two
Because
human beings
Joe
down the
felt
street
some
who
kind of
literally
way
have nothing to
about
do
two
with
human
Joe,
beings down the
right? Not directly anyway. right? Not directly.
Joe's feelings are still very real.
Joe's
The
feelings
fear
are
is
still
real. The
very
anger is real. The feelings are real.
Fear is real.
It's
The
just
anger is real.
that
The feelings are real.
story
It's just
that fuels those
the
feelings is
story
not based in
that
Joe's
fuels
lived
those
experience
feelings
of these
is
two
not
human
based in
beings.
Joe's lived experience of
Those
these
two
two
people have
human
now been
beings.
cast in a story
Those
that
two
Joe
people have
already
now been
possessed.
cast in
Does
a
that make
story
sense?
that Joe already possessed. Does that
So when
make
we think
sense?
about powered ways of existing,
So when we think about powered ways
and
of
when you are
existing,
willing to minimize, misrepresent, or
and when
outright
you are
reject
willing to
either queer
minimize,
identity in
misrepresent,
other
or
people
outright
or
reject
even queer
either
identity in
queer identity in
yourself,
other people or even queer identity in yourself,
is it based on your lived experience
based on
saying
your
that this is a
lived
terrible, horrible thing that has
experience
actually
saying that this
harmed
is
you
a terrible,
directly,
horrible
or
thing that has
is it
actually
based on a
harmed you
story
directly,
that you were
or
given
is it
about
based on
someone
a
else's
story that you were
discomfort,
given
about someone else's
discomfort,
misunderstanding,
about someone else's
and about somebody else's
misunderstanding,
willingness to minimize,
and about
misrepresent,
somebody
or
else's
outright
willingness
reject
to minimize,
because of how they
misrepresent,
felt.
or outright reject because of how they
This
felt.
is how a powered world continues
This
to
is
exist.
how a powered world continues
And
to
this
exist.
is why I want to
And
invite
this
you
is
to lean into
why
an
I want
empowered
to
world and
invite
an
you to
empowered
lean
way of
into an
engaging.
empowered
In an
world and an
empowered
empowered way of
world,
engaging. In an empowered
I am
world,
willing to own my truth
I am willing to
without
own my
oppressing
truth
myself and without
without
oppressing you.
oppressing myself.
That
and
means
without
in an
oppressing
empowered
you.
world,
That
I'm not
means
willing
in
to
an
remove your
empowered
sense of
world,
agency.
I'm not willing to
I
remove
matter.
your
I
sense
wouldn't
of
want you to do
agency.
that to me, and
I
so do
matter. I
you.
wouldn't want you to do that to me, and
In
so
an
do you.
empowered world,
In an empowered
we say,
world,
I own my truth without
we
oppressing
say,
myself
I own
and
my
without
truth without
oppressing
oppressing
you.
myself and
I
without
am not willing to
oppressing
minimize,
you. I
misrepresent, or
am not
outright
willing to
reject you.
minimize,
Because if
misrepresent, or
I
outright
do,
reject you. Because
that
if
means that I am
do,
willing
that
to
means that I
engage
am
as the
willing
oppressor and use
to
the
engage
tools
as the
of the
oppressor
oppressor,
and use the
which we
tools
have since
of the
learned
oppressor,
any human
which we
being
have
can
since
enroll
learned
as.
any human
It's a role,
being
people.
can enroll as.
We learn it,
It's a role, people.
and we either challenge
We
it
learn it,
or we use it.
and we either challenge it or we use it.
I am not here to tell you how you should exist
I
as a
am not
human
here
being.
to tell you how
I
you should
can't tell
exist
you
as
in
a
the
human
context
being.
of your own
I
moments
can't tell
what you
you in the
should and should
context of
not
your
do,
own
or
moments
what is and
what
is
you
not
should
going to be
and should
beneficial
not
to
do,
you. But
or
I
what
am
is and is not gonna be
absolutely
beneficial
here to
to
tell
you.
you
But I am
the difference between
absolutely
powered
here to
and
tell you
empowered
the
engagement.
difference
So
between
if you are
powered
willing
and
to
empowered
oppress,
engagement.
to minimize,
So if you are
misrepresent, and
willing to
outright reject,
oppress,
then let's call a
minimize,
spade a
misrepresent, and
spade.
outright
You're in a
reject,
powered
then let's call a
engagement,
spade
and
a
that's the way you
spade.
choose to
You're in a
exist in the
powered
world.
engagement, and that's the way you choose to exist
And
in
if
the
you are
world.
not willing to minimize,
And if
misrepresent,
you
or
are
outright
not
reject
willing
because
to
you want to
minimize,
exist as you
misrepresent, or
are,
outright reject
and you
because
want to
you
let
want
other
to
people
exist
exist
as
as
you
they
are,
are,
and you want to
it
let
doesn't
other
mean you're
people
not curious.
exist
It
as
doesn't
they
mean you don't
are,
question, and it
it
doesn't
doesn't
mean
mean
you
you're
don't
not curious.
challenge.
It doesn't
It
mean you
just
don't
means
question,
very
and it doesn't mean
specifically
you don't
that you are not
challenge.
willing to
It just means
minimize,
very specifically that you are
misrepresent, or
not willing
outright
to
reject. If that's
minimize,
you, then you are
misrepresent, or
willing and
outright reject. If
choosing
that's you,
to live in
then
an
you are willing and
empowered
choosing
human
to live
world.
in an
And I will tell
empowered
you
human
honestly,
world.
I have an
And I will
empowerment
tell you
bias.
honestly, I have an
I
empowerment
have that
bias.
bias because I know in my
I
lived
have that
experience
bias because
that the
I know in
transition
my
from
lived
powered to empowered, and
experience
every
that
moment
the
that I
transition
get
from powered
to
to
own
empowered,
my
and every
truth
moment
without
that I
oppressing
get
myself and without
to
oppressing
own
somebody
my
else
truth without
has helped
oppressing myself and
lift
without
me
oppressing
up
somebody else has
to
helped lift
feel
me up
aligned with
to
my
feel
existence as an
aligned
empowered
with
human
my
being.
existence as an empowered
I
human being.
love my life. I love my vibrance, and I
I
love being
love my
around
life.
other
I love my
people
vibrance,
who want
and
to
I
live
love
and
being
exist
around
in
other
their own
people
vibrance as
who want to
well.
live and
I don't want to
exist in
change
their
you,
own vibrance
and
as
I don't want to
well.
be changed
I
by
don't want
you.
to change you,
But
and I
if
don't want to be
in our
changed by you. But
coexistence,
if
in our shared moments,
coexistence,
and
in
our
our
human to
shared
human
moments,
interaction,
and our
I
human to human
naturally
interaction,
shift because of
I
our lived
naturally
experience
shift
together,
because of our lived experience
then
together.
far better be the world for it, my friends.
Then far
And
better be the
I
world for it, my friends. And
So,
far better be I for it.
here is that lesson.
So,
I've told you the story. I've
Here is that
dropped you a
lesson.
little few
I've
nuggets of
told you the
knowledge.
story.
The lesson
dropped
that
you a
we're
little
taking
few
away,
nuggets
of course,
knowledge.
is this.
The lesson that we're taking
The
away, of
oppressor.
course, is this.
Put it in quotes.
The oppressor.
It's a character. It's a
Put
role.
it in quotes.
And
It's a
any
character.
human
It's a
being
role.
can enroll as
And
it.
any human being
What does it
can
take to enroll
as
as the oppressor?
What
You
does
need the
it take
tools
to
of the
enroll as the
oppressor.
oppressor?
What are the tools
You
of
need
the
the tools
oppressor?
of the
Among
oppressor.
many things.
What are the tools of
For
the
the sake of
oppressor?
this
Among
episode,
many things.
a willingness
For the
to
sake of this
minimize,
episode, a
misrepresent,
willingness to
or
minimize,
outright reject.
misrepresent, or outright
outright
For those of you
reject.
who I know are going to be like, yeah, but what does that mean? What does that
For
look
those of
like?
you who I know are
Really
gonna be like,
quickly
"Yeah,
in a
but what does that
nutshell,
mean? What does that look
to
like?"
minimize
Really quickly in a
is to
nutshell,
make feel that
to
they are less
minimize
than or that they are
is to
wrong.
make feel that
That's
they
a
are
really
less
easy way to
than or that they
minimize
are
somebody.
wrong.
You're
It's a
wrong
really
for doing
easy way
that.
to
How could you
minimize
even think
somebody.
that? Or you're too
wrong for
loud.
doing that.
Why are
How
you
could
so
even think that? Or
obvious?
you're too
So
loud. Why are
flamboyant.
you
Could you
so
just tone it down?
obvious?
All of that is
So
minimizing,
flamboyant.
minimizing,
Could you just tone it down?
minimizing.
All of that is minimizing,
If
minimizing, minimizing.
you are like, okay, well,
okay?
what's misrepresentation?
If you are like, okay, well, what's misrepresentation?
It is one thing to misinterpret someone.
It is one
to say,
thing
oh,
to
I
misinterpret
thought that you were saying
someone.
this or
To say,
expressing
oh,
this when
I
really
thought that you were
this is
saying
what you
this or
meant,
expressing
right?
this
This was
when
your
really
intent. That's a
this is what you meant,
misinterpretation.
right? This was your intent.
A
That's
misrepresentation is
A
intentionally
misrepresentation
saying that someone is something they are
intentionally
not.
saying that someone
It's
is something
intentionally
they are
saying
not.
that someone is
It's
something that they don't
intentionally
identify
saying that
as.
someone is something
That
that they
is
don't
a
identify as.
misrepresentation.
That is a misrepresentation.
Outright rejection probably needs no definition or explanation. It is literally rejecting people, excluding people, putting people down, making laws that exclude people,
making laws
right, from expressing their own humanity. And we're not talking about harm here. And I know that's a bigger conversation for those of you who want to go down that rabbit hole. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people just living, living their own life, doing their own thing, being human, just like you, just like me.
Just like you.
So
just like me.
that is the lesson that we are going to be taking from today. And of course, you know, I've got an adventure challenge for you.
And of course, you know,
friends.
I've got an adventure challenge
Here
for
we
you,
go.
my
If you are up
friends.
for it this upcoming week, right, between this
If you are
episode
up
and the
for
next
it
one,
this
I want to
upcoming
invite
week,
you
right,
to
between
lean
this
into your
episode and the
edge.
next one, I want
We
to
have
invite you to
gamified
lean
this
into
for
your
you
edge.
folks.
We have gamified this for you folks.
How
we have
you can
gamified
lean in as a human being, lean into your edge with queer identity this month in June. We have for you, drum roll please. We have for you, drum roll, a queering quest. Yes, cue the music, cue the lights, cue all the dramatic things.
Cue the lights, cue all the dramatic
quest,
things.
in which we are going to lead you through a series of choices that you get to make,
a series
of commitments that you get to make this June. And if, my friends, that you can make those commitments, and there will be a link to this in these show notes. We're so stoked. It's the first month we're doing it. I'm ready. We're so stoked. It's the first month we're doing it. If you can make those commitments, you will be able to win a very special prize. A book bundle from Alok V. Menon.
A book bundle from Alok.
And if you don't know this individual, they are a champion, right? I would label them this.
Champion,
Excuse me.
I would label them this.
Of challenging the gender binary.
Of challenging the gender binary.
My voice is giving out. This is a sign I need to stop talking for this episode. So forgive me in my humanness. I'm going to bring it down a notch.
Forgive me in my humanness. I'm going to bring it down a notch.
That is your adventure challenge. Join the queering quest.
Adventure challenge. Join
it very
the
simply
quest.
is going to lead you through three different parts.
Going to lead you
Part one,
three different parts.
is the leaning in
Part one
continuum. It says, hey,
the leaning
from
in
1 to
continuum.
5,
It
1
says,
being
hey,
the most
from 1 to
private,
5,
least
1
public
being
it could
the
be,
most private,
and 5
least
being the
public it could be,
most
and 5
public,
being
least
the
private it could be.
most public,
Where
least
are
private
you
it could be.
when it comes to your relationship
Where
with
are
queer
you
identity?
when it comes to your
Are you at
relationship
a
with
1
queer identity?
or 2
Are you
or
at a
3
1
or 4 or 5?
2
And
or
when you
3
click the
or
link, you
4
will see
or
more
5.
about what I
And
mean
when
in
you
that.
click
It
the link, you will
really
see
helps
more
you to
about
say,
what I mean in
oh,
that. It
I'm ready to
really
deal with
helps
this
you to
with
say,
just me, level
oh,
1.
I'm ready
Or
to deal
with
with
someone
this
I
with
trust,
just me,
level
level
2.
1.
Or with
Or
someone
with
who has a
someone I
parallel
trust,
experience, level
level 2.
3.
Or with someone who
Or
has a parallel
semi-publicly,
experience,
level 4.
Or
Or I'm ready to be an
semi-publicly,
advocate, level 5.
Or
Yeah.
I'm ready to be an advocate.
You will
level
choose
5.
one of those.
Yeah.
And then beneath that, I told you
will
there was a
choose one
second
of those.
step.
And then
The
beneath
second
that, I
step,
told you there was a second
look
step.
at the
The second step,
activities that you could be
look
doing
at the
this month of
activities
Pride
that you could be doing
and lean
this month
into your
of
edge
Pride
by choosing
and
one.
lean into your edge by choosing
Just one. That's it. That's all I'm asking
Just
for
one.
in this case.
That's it. That's
Feel
all I'm
free to
asking
choose
for in
more,
this case.
but I'm
Feel
asking
free
you
to
to commit
choose
to
more,
one.
but I'm
And once
asking
you've
you to commit to
chosen
one.
that activity,
And
I
once
want
you've
you to move to
chosen
step
that
3, your
activity,
final step.
I want you to move
Commit to an
step 3, your final
accountability.
step.
Is
Commit
that
to an
accountability going to be, and we do have
Is
some
that
lists for you,
accountability going to be?
is it going to
and we do
be
have some
just a
lists for
private
you.
journal entry
Is it
because
going
you're
to
at level
be just
1?
a private journal
Is it going to
entry
be a
because you're at level
selfie
1?
between you and a friend?
Is it going to
because
be
you're
a
at level 2?
selfie
That's
between
someone
you and a
trust.
friend? Because
Is
you're
it
at level
going
2?
to be,
That's
and
someone
these
you
are just
trust.
examples that I'm giving
Is it going
folks,
to
right?
be, and
3,
these are just examples
parallel
that I'm giving
experience.
folks, right? 3,
4 is
parallel
semi-public, and 5 is
experience.
like go
4
on
is
social and you're going to
semi-public, and 5 is
tag me and
like
I'm going to repost
go
your
on
stuff,
social
right?
and you're going to
It
tag
tells
me and
you
I'm
all
going
the
to
different
repost your
levels.
stuff, right? It
And it
tells
is
you
really
all the
about
different
you
levels.
defining what this
And it is
queering
really
quest is going to
about
look
you
like for you.
defining what
I
this
want
queering
you to
quest is gonna
approach
look like
this
for you.
and stop
I want
avoiding
you
it.
to approach this.
And if you're like,
and
Nina,
stop
I'm not avoiding
avoiding
it. I'm absolutely approaching it.
And
Fantastic.
if you're like, Nina, I'm not avoiding it. I'm
Share that
absolutely
with me.
approaching
Share
it.
that with our
Fantastic.
community. let them know
Share
what
that
you're
with me.
doing.
Share
And
that
if
with
you
our community.
know
Let
that
them
this is
know
going to
what you're
benefit
doing.
you or
And if
somebody
you
else,
know
we're
that
already
this is
moving
gonna
into
benefit
the
you or
end of this
somebody else,
episode.
we're already
First,
moving
my
into the
call
end
to
of this
action for you,
episode.
Adventure
First,
Challenge,
my call to
join the
action for
Queering
you,
Quest.
Adventure Challenge,
Second,
join the
call to
Queering
action,
Quest.
Adventure
Second,
Challenge,
call to action,
share the
Adventure
Queering
Challenge,
Quest. That
share
is
the Queering
our
Quest.
invitation this month.
That
I want
is
to invite
our
you to play
invitation this month.
with
I want to
what
invite you to
I
play
feel is a beautiful
with
part of humanity.
What I feel is a beautiful part of
Play
humanity.
with all the parts of you that might be
Play
afraid
with all the parts of
and
you
be
that might
less
be
afraid. Because at
and
the
be
end of the
less
day,
afraid.
anything
Because
that
at the
exists
end of the
outside of
day,
you, just in
anything
its
that exists
existence
outside
being
of you,
scary,
just in its
is
existence
not
being scary,
actually because of its
is not
existence. It's because of
actually
a story
because
that you
of
have
its
within you.
existence. It's because of a
So if
story
you
that you
can
have
lean into
within
your
you.
edge in this quest,
So if
or
you
this
can lean
month,
into your edge in this
with your
quest,
own
or
relationship
this
with
month,
queer identity, if you can
with
lean
your
into
own
your edge
relationship with queer
and
identity, if you
approach it
can
in a
lean into
different
your
way,
edge
play with it in a
and
different
approach
way
it in a
this
different
month,
way, play with it in a different
it
way this
might
month,
just help
it
diversify
might
the
just
stories
help
that you have enough
diversify the
to give
stories
you
that you
such
have enough
perspective
to give
that you are
you
not
such
afraid anymore.
perspective that you are not
And it
afraid
didn't take
anymore.
removing anyone else or
And it
changing
didn't take
anyone else.
removing anyone else
All it
or
did
changing anyone else.
was take you
All it
controlling
did
what you can
was
control
take you controlling
some
what
new
you can
tools
control
being looked
with
at
some
in a
new
new way.
tools being looked
So
at in a new way.
that is what I planned for you today,
So,
folks. Thank you
that
so much
is
for
what I
listening
planned
in.
for
And
you
of course,
today,
if this has
folks.
been
Thank you
helpful,
so much
share
for
it.
listening in. And of
Biggest
course, if
thing
this
you
has
can
been
do to
helpful,
help create a
share
dialogue.
it.
If
Biggest
this
thing
has
you can
been
do to
really
help
helping you
create
like
a
Nina, I want to
dialogue.
let you know,
If this has been
reach
really
out to
helping you
me.
like Nina, I want
It
to let you
really
know.
does help me
Reach out
figure
to
out
me.
what kind of
It
material you
really
all want
does
to hear in
help
the
me figure
podcast,
out what
in
kind of
the
material
Empowered
you all
Human
want to hear in
community.
the
And of course, for
podcast,
those of you who
in
are
the
thinking
Empowered Human
about joining the
community. And of
Empowered
course,
Human
for those of you
community.
who are thinking
Thank
about
you
joining the
so much
Empowered
for
Human
being willing
community.
to explore your
Thank you
triggers, of
so
course, in
much
this
for
human
being
to
willing
human
to explore your
way.
triggers, of course, in
And
this human to
I
human
want you
way.
to
And
stay
I want
curious.
you to